citizen of the United States in order to be a citizen of your state. So if you didn't have to be, why were you? Through fraud. And that fraud is Social Security, driver's license, vehicle registration, all those good things that make your life so comfortable. They make your life very comfortable to be a slave. They don't want you to be free. It's hard to be free. You have to work at it. And most people are very lazy. They do not want to work. They just want to go along to get along. Leave me alone. I'll give you 75% of my paycheck every week. You know what I mean? Don't worry about it. You can have 75% of my paycheck. I'll live on 25%. Because I like the security of the government doing something. Remember what the government says? We're here from the government to help you. You know what I mean? They didn't say how they were going to help you. That's to take your life away. 75% of your life away from you. So you don't have it. And they tell you that in the courts. The courts have always said that. One of the key cases that I like to refer to is U.S. versus Otisville. It's a 1979 court case. That specifically says that all federal law only protects persons, aliens, and foreigners, not citizens. That's 1979. So if federal law doesn't apply to a citizen, what does that mean? All U.S. laws do not apply to a citizen, only to persons. And being a person is a slave. And the laws have all said that, right down the line. And being a person is something that is very easy to do because you're taken care of. Just like a concubine in Europe, you know what I mean? She's well taken care of, you know what I mean? The government takes care of you very well. I don't want to be taken care of. I want to be able to do things for myself. I want to be able to think for myself. I don't want the government telling me who I can talk to, what I can watch on television, what I can read, what I can't read, you know what I mean? And this is what, if you go back to ancient history, say in the 1700s, before the Revolutionary War with England, who was the leaders of the revolution? The Black Robes. And who were the Black Robes? The unregistered churches. Because they get up there and they spoke politically from the pulpit every Sunday. Don't pay the taxes to the king. He's no good. You know, right? You should read some of the sermons. If they ever read a sermon like that, and today's churches here, the IRS come down and audit, yank their 501c3 out from under them and everything. The preachers were the leaders of the revolution because they taught the people what they should. And King of England was having a big problem with our people here in the colonies. And the king sent one of his spies. He said, I'm sending a spy over there. I want to find out what's going on. He said, sent him over in a boat, spent 2 years going through the colonies, you know, everything, circulating through the colonies. And he come back to the king. He says, King, we got a big problem. He says, what's the problem? He says, all those people in the colony are going to be a major, major problem for us. He says, how's that? He says, well, they're out there plowing their field. They have a rifle over their shoulder. They're reading a law book and a Bible, and they're plowing the field at the same time. They're studying. We can't have these people studying and carrying weapons. What does that remind you of today? Our federal government. We don't want people reading and educating themselves. We don't want them to have guns, you know what I mean? Right down the line. Because what happened? The colonists revolted against England and won. Because the king was scared. because he had no way of controlling the people, because they were reading. And that's what I'm here to try to educate you so that you can read a little bit. And the other new thing I want to talk about was this new thing that came out just August 20th. It says, State High Court opinion says officers do not need search warrant to enter a home for community caretaking purpose. Impact is unclear. In other words, if you have your front door open and you got a bunch of garbage strewn around in your front yard, and in the front door, where the cops can see it, they can come in and say they're under community care. They can't do it to me because I'm not under community care. I'm not one of their community care persons. And being under community care, they can just walk in your house anytime they feel like. When I think your house is too dirty, we're going to check it out and see how dirty it is. We're going to try and do everything for you. And how did you get into that category? Very, very simply, when you got your Social Security number. When you got your Social Security number, you said, Uncle Sam, I'm a stupid nincompoop. I want welfare. I want unions. I want to be regulated and controlled every aspect of my life. I want you to tell me who to marry, when I can get married, what time I have to get up in the morning, what time I have to go to bed at night, because I'm too dumb to do anything for myself. I want you to have code enforcement come out to my house. By the way, code enforcement is my main enemy, not the government, the code enforcement. I hate them worse than anything. I love everybody else in comparison. I even love the IRS, but I don't like code enforcement. I want code enforcement to come out and tell me when to change a light bulb on the outside of my house, then charge me a fee for telling me that. I want code enforcement to come out to my house and tell me my roof is unsafe, it's too old, and I have to build a new roof and put it over my house because I'm too dumb to tell when it's leaking. And I want them to charge me a permit fee to inspect to make sure that I do it right, because I'm too stupid to do anything right. All this because you got a Social Security number. When did code enforcement and most of our main enemies come into effect? In the 40s. Right after the Public Salary Tax Act of 1939, everybody got a Social Security number. Now they entered into that category as a person. And their law specifically states that. In Title 26 it says, there is hereby imposed an excise tax on everybody who earns any money has a Social Security number. And the next line down says, if you're subject to one federal tax, you're subject to all of them. What does that tell you? You can't be a little bit pregnant. If you're paying Social Security, you owe all the rest. You're now a slave. That's your main enemy, is your Social Security number. I teach people to get jobs without Social Security number. You may have to quit your job. You may have to get fired from your job. But then we'll sue the company. I'll teach you how to sue. I educate you. I won't write your pleadings for you because I'm not an attorney. But I will educate you. I have sample pleadings right from the court I'll give you. And if you can't read the words that the courts and the attorneys wrote, you know what I mean? Sample go-bys. Make it simple. I like to do everything correct. Everybody likes that. But getting back to this, on police searches, on community aspects, the police have the absolute right under community safety to go into your house. But first they got to prove they have that authority. And how do they prove it? Well, you got a Social Security number. Or you're flying the American flag. We do not fly an American flag. When you fly the American flag with the horizontal stripes, you now have declared you're a federal territory in the military. What did Betsy Ross make? Betsy Ross made a war flag. When you fly the flag with the horizontal stripes, horizontal stripes, you are saying, I'm a military base. This is a declaration of war. And we had the FBI and the ATF tell a man that in Kansas. He had an American flag tacked on his front room wall. The FBI and the ATF walked in his house and said, what's your authority? He says, I'm a sovereign Kansas citizen. He says, no, you're not. He says, what's your authority from coming in here? He says, that flag right there. It tells me I have all the authority in this house, that I own everything in this house, and you don't. That's what they told him. So he burnt the flag. They're very, very correct when they do things. The government never violates a law. They may stretch it, but they'll never break it. In the same context, you can stretch a law. And you make them stretch it so far that they have to break it. Now you got them. Steve is one of my key people that likes to make them stretch it so that the rubber band breaks. Before we get into further here, I brought a front page out of my book here. It's the sovereign states, notes of a citizen of Virginia. Chicago, 1957. This book is not published anymore. They pulled it off the shelves. Few of the law libraries and public libraries still have it. I have a hardback copy of this at home. If you can get hold of one, get hold of it. Published in 1957. It explains all the true intent of what the federal government was supposed to be doing, that the 14th Amendment is not law. It explains each amendment right down the line. Written in 1957. How come it was pulled? I called the publisher here. And the publisher was out of Chicago. He sold the rights to a company in Atlanta, Georgia. And the company in Atlanta, Georgia was advised by men in black suits to destroy the plates. And that's what they did, because when I called the printers, that's what they said. Yes? The Sovereign States, Notes of a Citizen of Virginia. Not a U.S. citizen, Notes of a Citizen of Virginia.
Well, Richard, what's the author's name?
James Jackson Kilpatrick. James Jackson Kilpatrick. I called him. He's still alive. He lives in South Carolina. He's 90-some odd years old. He sold the rights to the book. I says, are you going to do a addendum to it or a new book? He says, no. He says, I will never publish another thing like that. That was the end of the conversation. I think he'd been approached and advised otherwise. But it's a very good book, and everybody should read that. And that's one of the primers that I use. And since this tape goes nationwide, everybody was talking about why I use my mailing address the way I do. I follow the rules in Federal Postal Publication 51 of a foreign mailing address. Most everybody in this room is older than I am, but I can remember back when they used to have the city and the postal code, right, two letters, numbers right behind the city. That's when it was a postal code. And the state is spelled out all in caps, and that makes it a foreign address, according to their address right here, postal code. It's Postal Publication 51. You can go to any post office and get one. They may not have it, but you can ask them for it, and they'll get it for you. It's no problem. This is a 1995 edition, so there's probably a new one out by now. But you follow the rules and regulations that the government puts out. I follow every rule and regulation the government puts out that apply to me. I do not follow the laws of Tokyo, Japan, because I don't live in Japan. I do not follow the laws of Tucson, Arizona, because I don't live in Tucson, Arizona. nor do I follow the laws and obey the laws of the District of Columbia, because I don't live there and I'm not subject to the laws of the District of Columbia. But I do follow God's laws. And by following God's laws and the law of the land, you can be a winner. So with that, Steve wanted to speak for about 10 or 15 minutes here about his court case. Steve is my sensei here, and he teaches me everything I know. And he was in court last week, Tuesday, and everybody was very inquisitive what happened in court. So let's give Steve a hand here. Steve, come on up.
Is that for me?
No.
August 31st was the court date. I'm going to assume that most people here know the story, so I won't bore everybody going back over it. But basically, what the judge had said was that
Steve, there's several new faces in.
you want to. Okay, I'll give a short recap for those folks who may not know. Back on June 7th of 1995, I was stopped on the Ventura Freeway at about Topanga Canyon Boulevard by the Highway Patrol. The reason for the stop was that the car that in which I was traveling had no license plate. The officer made the traffic stop, one thing led to another, he took the car. Sometime thereafter I went to trial. It was a court trial as opposed to a jury trial. And the trial lasted, I don't know, a couple of hours. And the judge found me guilty, no jail time, although the prosecuting attorney had wanted 6 months in jail and either $500 or $1,000 on top of that. He was not a happy camper. Instead, the judge gave me $250, which with the penalty assessments and surcharges and tax, tip, and license came to $721. That was 4 years ago. I've been doing motions and hearings and pleadings and appeals and writs of error and God knows what all else, trying to get the court to acknowledge the fact that it had completely screwed this case up so badly that there was no way in the world that there was any evidence to sustain the conviction. The last, just immediately prior to the 31st, judge said, look, I've never heard of a case, a traffic case going for 4 years. This has got to come to a halt. I want you back here on the 31st. I want $721 or you're going to jail. Those are your choices. What I had planned to do on the 31st was to address the court on the record, because this particular judge has made so many mistakes that it's unbelievable. In fact, just prior to that, I had taken what is called a writ of certiorari with the appellate department of the Superior Court. Essentially what that is a pleading whereby you go to the court just above the court that you're having the problem with, and you say, look, the trial court lacked original jurisdiction because, since there was a lack of original jurisdiction, obviously this conviction is a nullity, it's bogus, it needs to be flipped. I filed, including the exhibits, a 90 or 91 page document with the appellate department. And I said this has to be done on an emergency basis because I'm facing the threat of incarceration. Filed the documents, served it. A couple days later I called the appellate department and spoke to the head clerk. And she said, well, the city attorney called and he has informed the court that they will not be making an appearance in this matter. Which is a good thing, because I'm alleging certain things in my pleading. The other side's supposed to come in and say, oh, no, 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 he's got it all wrong. Here's the real story. That's an opposition. But the city attorney, the prosecutor, decided to stand down. The other party who could have responded would have been the court, the trial court. Nothing. My pleading was the only pleading before the appellate department. For some reason, there is one judge in the appellate department whose name is Judge Paquita, And apparently, every pleading that has my name on it goes to his desk. Because every time I get something back, and it's always no, has his name on it. This time I thought, well, it's going to be interesting because there's nothing else but my pleading, my allegations, my exhibits. Nobody else is saying a word. There's also a local court rule for Los Angeles. I think it's either 9.14 or 9.15, which says that when an opposition is either untimely and or is not submitted at all, that the pleading, in this case my pleading it would have been, at bar, is considered to be meritorious. The concept here being that if the other side didn't care enough to argue about it, whatever I was saying must have been true. And therefore, the opposing counsel had no standing to appear before the court, should not be allowed to argue, except to the extent of asking for a continuance to late file the documents they didn't file in the first place. Well, none of that happened, so I figured looking pretty good. Well, Judge Kakita, of course, had a better idea, and his idea was denied. No comment, no explanation, just denied. So I thought, okay, fine. I can take this up to the second appellate, which I'm going to do. But on the 31st, I went to court, and unfortunately, there was a preliminary hearing on a murder case. And by the time I arrived to see the judge, they were already in session. And the clerk told me that I could wait until the noon break, and then I could address the court. Well, Judge Metzler and I have been going around and around this particular barn for 4 years, and he's had enough. So when he wrapped the morning session of this prelim, he got up off the bench and scuttled off to his chambers, and that was the end of that. So, thanks to some friends who had showed up to provide moral support and financial support, we got the $721 squared away. That money has been paid because for a number of reasons, jail is not the place for me to be. Getting in is easy. Getting out might be a little bit more difficult. So now there's kind of an interesting situation here. The trial court never, unquestionably, never acquired jurisdiction of this case. We have a situation where I never entered a plea, in which I demanded a verified complaint, timely. Judge refused me one, which means that they lack jurisdiction if for that reason alone. The highway patrol officer was never sworn, but allowed to testify. Got a lot of problems with this case. And now it appears that the judge and the police officers and the court clerk and some of the folks down at the appellate department have engaged in a conspiracy, arguably, to prevent me from wresting myself from the court's control. And it would appear that unless something dramatic happens, which it may, that we're going to end up in federal court over this, and we'll see if the feds can do a better job of adjudicating the issue than the state has been able to do. There's some other stuff going on that I wish I could talk about, but I can't, in part because, as Richard says, these tapes seem to go a lot of places, and I was talking to somebody on the phone about this today. I can't prove this, but I have a feeling that my association with the master may be problematic to this extent. My pleadings routinely come back denied, and routinely come back denied without comment. Nobody ever says that I'm doing garbage law. Nobody ever says that the pleadings, in terms of format, are inappropriate. Nobody ever says that they're untimely. It's simply denied. And I think what's happening is that I have probably been red flagged as a guy who's just a problem child who will not go away. But there are some other people who are doing somewhat the same thing that I'm attempting to do with the same kinds of pleadings. And rather than prejudice some of those efforts, I'll simply say it'll be interesting to see what happens with similar pleadings that don't have my name on them. Because I wish those folks well, and they certainly deserve to to survive the court's scrutiny. But the issue has not gone away, and it's not going to go away, and we're going to continue to hold the court's feet to the fire, in part because they are just so wrong, even by their own law. So that's the story. If you've got any quick questions, fine. If not, I'll give it back to Richard.
I have a question.
I've got an answer. It might be I don't know, but I'll try.
So they arrested you and took you to jail?
Um,
Car thing originally?
It depends on what you mean by an arrest. Every traffic stop.
No, but I mean, did you get a ticket or did they take you to jail?
Well, that's a different question. I got a citation. I did not go to jail.
Did you sign it?
Of course. Absolutely. But the point is that every traffic stop is an arrest. Why did you ask if I signed it?
Well, because we do things a little bit differently.
How do you do it?
First of all, we object to everything. At the moment, our rights are violated.
Okay.
And if it comes down to signing a ticket, we don't sign it. We print non-assumpsit and print our last name, because non-assumpsit means you're not assuming the promise. And so therefore, when you enter the court, your appearance is special because they have not acquired jurisdiction in personam. And they have to give you a verified complaint, and that's an improper summons to court.
Well, Richard probably has some thoughts about that. I'll just respond very, very quickly. The verified complaint is something that they are required to do,
I understand.
whether or not you have signed the promise to appear. Since I would have no intention of failing to appear, I don't have a problem signing the citation. The citation, signed or unsigned, doesn't give anybody in personam jurisdiction. All it is a promise to appear. What happens after you appear determines whether or not the court gets in personam jurisdiction or subject matter jurisdiction as far as that goes. My experience has taught me that when the court makes enough mistakes and gets in deep enough, at least in my case, rather than say, you know what, we've made a mistake, let's untie this deal, what they do is say, let's get a bigger shovel and dig this hole a little deeper, a little faster. And that's where we are. I don't know where you're from, but in Los Angeles, that kind of activity could get you a ride to the Great Bar Hotel.
Well, hey, want my hands in front or in back?
Oh, always in
And
back.
by the way, do you have a boat?
Yeah. Fair enough. I'll give it back to you. You may
I
have.
have a question. Did you sign UD for under duress?
No, because, and here again, Richard may have some thoughts. I don't believe in that. Quite frankly, I think that all of that stuff doesn't really avail you much, and I don't know that it has much legal significance. If somebody can persuade me otherwise, I'm willing to hear the argument. But I think what it tends to do is to tick off the officer on the scene. And as Richard would say, nightclubbing with LAPD is not a good program, and the time to make your fight and your stand is not at the curbside.
Yeah.
And I'm just not going there. Not willingly, anyway. I'll fight in court, but not on the street, if I can avoid it. It's yours.
Did you know Steve was the only person, excuse my French, the only citizen?
Thank you. Clean that up.
I got to clean up my act there. The only citizen who's ever kept the DMV record from being entered into the record completely. They couldn't enter the registration. They couldn't enter anything from the DMV in, because under the evidence code, if you do learn the evidence code correctly, they cannot enter anything into the court. And I learned this from an old judge who's passed away now. He's an old friend who's the same age as I was, 93. And he passed away. And he said, someone called me up several years ago, and he said, Richard, how would you like to win every court case you're involved in? I said, I'd love to. He says, I'll tell you 2 words. Evidence code. He says, read and study the evidence code. Because if you understand the evidence code, you can enter anything you want into the evidence, and they cannot enter anything into it. So I went out and I bought about 15 different books on the evidence code, every book I could find. And I read them cover to cover. And that's what I was teaching a couple years ago, that. And that's where Steve learned about the evidence code. And he kept him from getting the DMV record. And Steve's got several attorney friends, and they come to him and say, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? They didn't believe you could keep the evidence code, the DMV record, out of the court. And he also disqualified the police officer and had him ruled incompetent to testify in his court case. So he got convicted by a person who was incompetent, unsworn, without a verified complaint,
and in the absence of a DMV record of any kind.
and in absence of they really had to dig the hole deep to get convicted. You know what I mean? And the judge bent over backwards.
Let me bend it over forwards when I'm done. Sorry.
But all you have to do is learn the evidence code. That's one of the most crucial things you can learn. If you understand the evidence code, it's very important. And there's several books, California Courtroom Evidence, and there's Federal Courtroom Evidence. You get those two books, they're about $100 a piece, and they're about that thick. I got mine several years ago, and they come out every year. I can't afford them every year. But they have all the principles, any section of the code, and gives you all the court cases to back them up. They can't bring in your driver's license without proving that you signed it. They have to take a handwriting exemplar and bring a handwriting man in and verify that you're the one that signed that application form. And they have to bring in the original application form, which they don't have. There's 100 ways in that one section to keep the DMV from bringing in those records. Hearsay. One of the key arguments on hearsay is, I don't care what it is, whether it's the federal government, IRS, it's a DMV, I don't care who it is or what it is. Any agency, FTB, makes no difference, any governmental agency, if they have a computer printout of something, they have to bring in the computer, they have to bring in the person who inputted the information into the computer, and they have to swear that everything they put in that computer was absolutely true and correct. And here's this little $7.95 an hour girl sitting there typing this information. I don't know whether it's true or not, I'm just typing it in. How can you be sure it's correct? It's not. So you make them bring the computer, pull the computer out of DMV headquarters in Sacramento and put it on a flatbed truck and trailer it down here. You know what I mean? You can do all kinds of things if you just read the evidence code. It's the most crucial thing. Cece here is from Nevada. She remembers me telling her years ago, get the evidence code. Study the evidence code. If you're going to law school or whatever you're doing, study the evidence code. Because you can take your professors and train them.
Richard?
Yes.
Maybe you could say a few words about the federal system versus the state system from this perspective. You know better than anybody else how much time I've spent doing this and how much time I spend in court. And my experience has been that the judges simply are not prepared. Forget about opposing counsel. They haven't got a clue. Once they have said, you're a constitutionalist wacko, that's the rest of their argument. It really doesn't go much beyond that. And so what happens is, they look to the judge to bail them out. And as you know, in the one case in Van Nuys, when I got a judge who was willing to let me work, I saw him twice. The second time, the Attorney General got beaten up so badly that when I came back the third time, we were in a new courtroom with a new judge. So now the question arises in my mind, is the federal system that much different from the state?
Much different, because the state systems are predicated on generating revenue. They're revenue courts, strictly revenue courts. The federal court system is not designed to generate revenue. Okay? They're there to generate justice, so-called. You know what I mean? Because the judges are sworn in lifetime. They don't have to worry about it. Like Manuel Riel says, he's sworn in for life, and he says, I'm a judge for the rest of my life, and I'm God. He said that right in his courtroom. He said, I'm God, and I can do whatever I want. He says, I get reversed every time I get on the bench. He says, I don't care, because I make decisions the way I want to make them, because I'm God. And he got reversed.
But, I mean, there's some subtle irony there that the federal government theoretically should be the solution to my problem with the state.
Yes.
And we'll see.
Unless you have one of those judges who said that federal law don't apply in my courtroom. But then when you serve them a summons in the federal court, I was in federal court, to give you an example. I was in federal court, a friend of mine, on a code enforcement case. That's my main thing. And he took the county attorney and the code enforcement officer down to federal court because the county prosecutor and the code enforcement officer had got together in the courtroom with the judge and had a private conference without him. Minsky. So he took him in the federal court. And that judge really come unglued when he told the story about how these three of them went in the back room, made a deal to come out and convict him. And that federal judge come down and told that county prosecutor, you don't ever go into speak to the judge one word about somebody else's case that you're involved in. If I ever hear of that, he says, I will personally prosecute you. Now you go back there and straighten this mess out, and I don't want you back in my courtroom. Boy, we were on the 7th floor downtown. So the federal judges understand problems with the state. You just have to bring it to their attention in a proper way. So people get tired of listening to me talk, so we have a couple visitors here. The next visitor here is C.C. Weldon. She's one of my old service centers from Las Vegas, Nevada, and she started her own little thing going on. And let's give C.C. a hand here.
Okay. Well, state citizenship is the most important thing that we can be doing today. And there are many ways to go after these boys because they don't know the law. But what is the law? The law of the land is the Constitution, the state Constitution. And we have a little bit different approach to the traffic officer. And I'll just give you a little scenario. And I play act with the police officers that I know just to see how this will fly because I have not had the opportunity. Although I am looking forward to that opportunity if I do get to go to Gray Bar Hotel. For instance, the reason that the police officer has those red and blue lights is because that is an emergency vehicle. There is one law that is a crime, and that is if a police officer asks for your assistance or a fireman asks for your assistance and you refuse to give it to him. That is a crime because he's out there trying to save life and property. And if he asks you to help him and you don't, that's a crime and he can take you to jail. So when the red and blue lights go on and that officer pulls you over, what's he doing first of all? He's pulling you over because there's some kind of an emergency. So when he walks up to your automobile, your first word should be, "Officer, how can I help you? What's the emergency?" And then he's going to say something like, "Well, I pulled you over because you ran that stop sign." Now, the Supreme Court says that you must object and assert your rights at the moment they are violated in a meaningful time, at a meaningful time, and in a meaningful place. I'll have to object to that, officer, because now I know there's no emergency. I'll have to object to that. Well, I want to see your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. I'll have to object to you asking me for those things, officer, but let me see if I can find them. 9 times out of 10, you are not going to get a ticket. So you look, because by law, they can only detain you for 60 minutes. Otherwise, that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So you start to look, and you look, and I always carry around a little notebook that's got a whole bunch of papers in it. And they can't take you to jail because you're trying to comply. And gee, you might just be human. Gee, I hope I didn't forget that license on the table. I hope I didn't leave it in the restaurant. You know, I hope I didn't leave it in that law book I read every night. I use it for a bookmark. So now you look and you look and you look, and if you don't have any contraband in your car, you can get the officer to help you look too. In fact, there was a lady who, she had 6 police officers looking out in a field. She thought she dropped it. And after about 45 minutes, they all looked over, and she had her arms crossed, and she was sitting on the hood of her truck, just watching them look. But anyway, my friend Tom can tell you that this happened to him, and I told him, I said, because he hasn't had a license in a while, I said, just look for it. And the officer let him go, because 9 times out of 10, they're out there to raise revenue. So now, let's say the first thing that officer wants to do is he wants to make a positive identification of who you are. So even if you can't find your license, he's going to ask you, what's your name? And by law, all you have to do is you have to state, identify yourself, tell him your name, and tell him where you live. Well, my name is Cecilia Ann Wilkes Weldon, and I live at Township 21 South, Range 64 West, Section 13. And that is at approximately mile marker 23.5 of the prescriptive easement known as Highway 12 on the north side. Okay, now I have identified myself, and I have told where I make my home. Of course, they want to see some kind of state ID card, but the law does not say that you have to produce a state ID card. So, a little bit farther. So anyway, I take along business cards. I'm a personal friend of Magistrate Blancs and a personal friend of the sheriff. And so now that officer, if you really want to know who I am, you can call up Magistrate Blanc, you can describe me to him, and he will tell you that I am who I say I am. And if you don't believe him, you can call up Sheriff Snyder. He knows me personally. You can describe me to him, and he will tell you that I am who I say I am. Okay, maybe that's not good enough. So what else do they want? They want a birth date. Well, you know, officer, I'm born again, and I just don't recognize that old date. And if I give you my born again date, it's only going to make me a few years old. Well, then I want your social security number. Well, you know, officer, that's against my religious beliefs. I view that number as a mark of the beast. Well, you had to get that number to get a license. You had to give it to him. Well, you know, officer, I'm born again. I'm trying to correct the error of my ways. So now he doesn't have anything to run me on. Okay, now say he views you as being uncooperative. Well, I think you're just being uncooperative, and I'm going to take you to jail. Well, you know, officer, I understand that you are just trying to do your job, and you are just trying to feed your family. But you've got to understand that I am doing my job, and I am exercising my rights at this moment to preserve them so that your grandchildren will be able to exercise those same rights. Now, 9 times out of 10, they're going to let you go because they're too busy to be out there raising revenue. Okay, but what I was saying earlier, should they choose to give you a citation, because they do try to use that citation as a summons to court and a complaint,
And in New Mexico, they have a little statute that says that the police officer could prosecute it. I have a major objection to that because he is not learned in the law, and that's a violation of the separation of powers doctrine. So we use the state constitutions against everything that they do. We don't even really need to look at their statutes much. We just use the Constitution. Anyway, so by printing, they cannot do a handwriting analysis. And by printing non-assumpsit, you're not assuming the promise to appear, but you're going to be there. You're going to be there so much, they're going to get tired of seeing you. And if you view this as an opportunity, where else can you have your own judge, your own prosecutor, and maybe your own jury to play with? But anyway, should you get a ticket and try this method, when you do go into court, number one, in the rules it says that a complaint must be on 8.5 by 11-inch paper, and it doesn't say anything about pink. Okay? And because you haven't assumed the promise to appear, it is an improper summons to court, and you are entitled to a proper arraignment. And a lot of my friends end up having 4 or 5 arraignments. And one of my very dear friends who was harassed by the dog cops, she just recently passed away, she had 9 police officers there. A couple of them she knew. And she had them so flustered, they forgot to put her name on the pink thing. and that was dismissed. So a dismissal is a win. Anyway, we like to pull dirty lawyer tricks. The judges love them because they are so bored with telling all the people how many rights they're waiving. I mean, I have timed them. They go through it so quick, and they do like to have a little excitement in their courtroom. And so when one of us gets in there, they get excited. You know, they look forward to the day we come in. Anyway, that's just one of the little things that we do, and it's kind of fun to take everything as an opportunity to educate, because we've all been victims of this fraud. And then what I have with me and what I'm doing over in Las Vegas, I came back to Las Vegas to educate the people over the airwaves, because there is another emergency coming called Y2K. And no matter how you view that, whether you think it's no problem or whether you think it's a big problem, they will take advantage of it. And there are already emergency regulations that are due to go into effect November 1st. In Nevada, I found 8 pages, and they were just titles. If you click on each one of the titles, you get 3 or 4 pages on each one. So anyway, what we are doing in Nevada is we are reinstating our Republican forms of government. And I have a package that I put together. It's got a 4-hour seminar that gives the whole history on the income tax and how it came into existence and what the Constitution really is, and it's a trust. And to prove that, if you look in Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, under the definition of estate, under number 6, it says the general business of government, hence a political body. But now, in this sense, we use state. So the estate that was created is the Republican form of government. It was created to protect the blessings of liberty, to secure that. And so I also have put together in that package the remedies, and it's not what I say, it's according to Congress. It's according to the rules and regulations found in the CFR in 1976 by Public Law 94-412 on September 14th. They terminated over 470 war power statutes that were being used by the president all the way back to Lincoln, and they gave us the ability to reinstate our Republican forms. Okay, they also had to write the rules and regulations on how to correct the label codicil situation with the 1040 form. And when you go into and read these regulations, it's absolutely beautiful, because they encourage us to do this. And it's not just for the people that filled out the 1040 forms, but it's also for the state businesses that filled out the 1120s. And when you follow these rules and regulations, you can go all the way back to the beginning and get back every dime that you've ever paid in. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, have you done that? Well, I never filled out a 1040 form, so I never created the label. But I have several people in the process, and I have an affidavit and second codicil that I did for several people 5 years ago before I even realized that the information that I had was absolute dynamite. And I know that one guy's been working with a W-8 ever since then, and the other guy, we didn't know to file the claims for refund at the time, but he gets a letter every year saying he's not required to file. Now, he didn't go that far with the driver's license, which now what we're doing is we're taking it to a whole new level. We're going back, we want all DMV, because that's all under the Federal Highway Trust Fund, which was established under 26 U.S.C. under Section 9301. The Federal Highway Trust Fund, if you bring that up in court, they don't want to talk about that. They usually dismiss your case right out. Okay, so we're going after every tax that we ever paid, because under Title 31, under 321, Money and Finance, under the authorities of the Secretary of the Secretary of the Treasury has got to open separate accounts for every single tax that's collected, and there's a different system of records for every tax that's collected. And so the IRS has all those records, Social Security, income tax, DMV, all of them. Your county assessor has all the property tax information. There are claims for refund. It's just, their whole thing is that if you don't know who you are, it's just not their fault. So that's what we're doing. We're discovering who we are, and we're taking back the power. We're the boss. We're not the subject. We're not subject to the jurisdiction. In a case called United States versus Slater, the court stated, unless the defendant can establish that he is not a citizen of the United States, the IRS possesses the authority to determine his federal tax liability. The key here is liability. You are either liable or you are not liable. You are either a taxpayer or you are not a taxpayer. You are either a resident alien or you are a non-resident alien. There's two of everything, just like Richard's been telling us all along. They all wear two hats, and absolutely everything that they do is constitutional. It's just not their fault if you don't know who you are. So we're having a good time over in Las Vegas, and I decided to just give this information out freely over the airwaves, and I just got through doing my 6th show. I have a 13-week contract, and then I have friends that want me to keep going and going and going, and we'll see what happens at the end of that 13 weeks. But I have brought copies of my radio show. They are, for purchase, 10 Federal Reserve notes. It's a deal tonight. But anyway, there's a lot of information on there, and everything that I speak about, I absolutely have the evidence. Everything that I take in to the radio station, I have it right in front of me. I'm in the process of putting together a Buck Act book, which a lot of people have been doing, but I'm putting together my own. And in my package that I sell for $99, I have 2 books. Well, it's actually included all in one book now, but it's all evidence. You can write an affidavit out of it. It's all there, all the authorities. And I am constantly adding things in. And a little bit later down the line, I'm going to put in some simple forms for people to use, because we just don't have a lot of time. But it only took 3% to initiate the Revolutionary War, and I'm not advocating war. I want to get rid of the war powers. That's the only way the courts view. They only view things 2 ways. Does the controversy arise under the Constitution, or does it arise under war powers? And what we are doing is restoring our sovereignty in our states, and the only way we can do that is for the people to come back onto the land and get out of their federal areas. Yes?
You made a very interesting statement about the courts having to operate either a controversy under the Constitution or under the War Powers Act. How did you come to that conclusion? What sorts of...
Well, I'll tell you, if you go into 26 U.S.C. under 911D, it states that the Internal Revenue Code is regulated by the Trading with the Enemy Act. Okay, and your police officers, not your sheriff department, but your highway patrol and your city police are all military ranks. They are under war powers. They all have a fringed flag. That's war powers. Okay, all your emergency, if you go into an emergency room, all your information goes to FEMA. Okay, we're under emergencies. It's not a real emergency because it all relates back to the banking crisis of '33, which has nothing to do with us out here. Congress terminated all those war powers except the 1933 emergency, but that doesn't matter because the reason in Title 31 CFR that there are two sets of definitions is because we have two money systems here. We have the constitutional money, which is the gold and silver, and then we have that fictional stuff, that everybody's been using. One exciting thing that we're getting ready to do, I had a lawyer approach me. She bought my package. She viewed it 3 times. I have one guy that watches it every night. He says he learns something new every night. And I will at some point in time be doing another seminar, and I'll be updating everything because I have more information now than I had when I did that, which was just in April. But anyway, this lawyer approached me, and we are going to the Supreme Court. We are going up on a writ of certiorari. We are going up on a federal question. You do not have to initiate it in a lower court. We're going right to the Supreme Court with it. But we're not doing it right away because we want to make sure it's perfect. And there are so many questions that we've raised that, I don't have to be the only one. There's people that can come in right behind me with another question. And the main issue, the way I see it, is the 13th Amendment. In Section 2, it says, Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Congress cannot give themselves power. That is number one. The only power they can get has to be derived from the Constitution. And so when they let the 10 southern states back into the Union upon condition that they accept the 13th Amendment, that was unconstitutional. Absolutely. And in a case called Dred Scott, everybody's heard about that case? Okay, if there's a paragraph in there that is very profound, and it says that if Congress has the power to abolish slavery, then they must also possess a like power to create it. And that's exactly what they did. Because they had no power to abolish it anyway. It has to be done at a state level. And so one of the things that we state right away in our affidavits is, number one, we are not engaged nor involved in any act of rebellion or insurrection, and that we do not hold other human beings in a condition of servitude or slavery. So that clears that up right there. That takes us right out from underneath war powers. We're not rebelling on anything. We just use the Constitution against them because it belongs to them, not us. It's for our protection. We're members of the posterity. We're holders of the privilege, entitled to all the protections of the Bill of Rights. Anyway, so that's just some of the things we're doing, and we're having a good time, and we've got a lot of people very interested and a lot of people hanging on the fringe, waiting to see a check, and I have several people in the process getting very close. And I myself, I worked in a casino for 3 years, and I did fill out a W-4, so I created a presumption. And I've just been very busy with other people, but in the next 2 weeks I am going to update my affidavits that I have filed in the past, and I'm going down with 2 witnesses to the local IRS office, and I'm going to have them fill out my claim for refund for me. See, our position and our attitude in this is we're sick and tired of their fraud, and so we are not going to take a chance on their highways with their tortfeasors, with their revenue agents out there, and take a chance on them throwing us in jail and stealing our property, and then us having to spend our money and our time going into the courts and playing the games. We're not dealing with that anymore. They created the fraud, correct it. We correct our status, now you correct the problem. We want our money back, and we want it now. If you don't produce it, you have a claim to jump right into district court. Well, we have district court, you have superior court here. And you can go in the nature of declaratory judgment, and be declared one who is not subject to the statutes. Right there in the rules. Anyway, like Richard said, the rules of evidence are very important because that's all they teach the police are the rules of evidence. They don't really know much about the Constitution, so that's our job. We get to teach them about that. Anyway, thank you, and continue on.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Susie. Aren't I terrible? I teach these women how to be as nasty as me, you know what I mean? I educate them and they go on beyond me. They step on my shoulders and keep right on moving up. And I feel good. I love educating people. Well, it's 8:30 now, so let's take a break for about 10 minutes and give everybody a chance to stretch their legs before they get bored, because I got quite a bit to talk about here, and I got some good information here.